Hello and welcome to the Week 6 video for the NFL Survivor Pools brought to you by Pool Genius. My name is Steven Andress, joined each and every week by the lead analyst over at Pool Genius, Jason Lisk. And we had some carnage this week. Before we get to all that, before we get to our Week 6 handicap for your Survivor Pools, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Let us know in the comments who you're picking in your pools this week. We got more than 500 likes last week, so a big thank you to everybody out there. Let's try and beat that again this week. Let's get to 550 likes for week number 6. Jason, we wondered if we'd finally see some carnage. We got it. Most of these pools have been wiped out. Circa Survivor, 60% of the remaining entries gone. I'm in a pool with 100,000 entries at the start of the year. It's down to 10,000. 90% of that pool wiped out. We could talk about all these teams that were big favorites that could have won, should have won. The Rams losing to the 49ers B team, the Cardinals losing to the Titans. That's the one where I just, my condolences go to anybody that had the Cardinals because you did not deserve that. That was just an all-time bad Survivor beat.
Yeah, on that front, I wrote an article yesterday. I actually was so when something like that happens, I have to be like, okay, let's flash back. Let's see what else is out there. Certainly I had some in my memory, but I went and researched the last 15 years worth of seasons. And because we do have pick data in Survivor pools for that period to take like Survivor relevant games and find like the worst beats. There's not even a close second, I don't think. I mean,
really,
you tell me that a team had a 21-6 lead as a heavy favorite and lost it, and just tell me that probably qualifies you in the top 15, because that doesn't happen very often. I mean, teams that are favored over a touchdown generally don't blow multiple score leads in the fourth quarter, right? Against bad teams, because there's a reason those teams are given so many points, because their offenses are usually not good. So that fact alone, but then you add the specific facts, the plays, dropping the ball before you go in for the clinching touchdown, scoring on a interception to a fumble recovery. I mean, the ball off Kyler's face mask when they're about to kick to go up 24-6. I mean, the Cardinals were up 21-3 within the first 20 minutes of that game and did not score again. I mean, it's Callahan was probably, he might be fired today if not for that crazy sequence. But I guess if you're looking for the silver lining, we now have the Titans and Brian Callahan to pick on for longer in Survivor. So anyway, check out that article. I did write on the site. It's on Pool Genius in the Survivor pools, in the Survivor section. It's a free article to read. Some of the other beats, by the way, you might remember some. One was that Bengals game against the Jets with Mike White. They had a 10-point lead late. Burrow threw a deflected pick, and White scored twice in 2 minutes to beat them. Another one, there was let me think of the 49ers and the Cardinals just last year. You remember that game? The kicker was hurt, right? The 49ers situation, and they couldn't kick a field goal, and they didn't score in the second half, and then Jordan Mason fumbled when they could have sealed it late, and Arizona came back and beat them. That's probably up there in the top 5. I think I had it second or third. So those are what we're dealing with of like the worst beats. This one doesn't even, I mean, this is in a different stratosphere of like, this is like, how your NFL film.
Let me put a number on it, Jason. Yeah. Let me put a number on it real quick. Even after DeMercado dropped the ball before the goal line, the Cardinals were still 97.1% to win that game.
I mean, which makes sense.
And then all the other stuff that you talked about happened. Even despite those shenanigans, still 97.1% to win the game, and they somehow lost the game. Callahan after the game, Brian Callahan, the Titans head coach, he was so sheepish, like he couldn't celebrate. He knew that was just like an all-time lucky break for his team. So I'm with you, man. It doesn't change my opinion on the Titans whatsoever.
I mean, you remember you've seen those NFL films like history pieces, right, where they have the music and John Facenda's talking. Back in the 70s, they would have crazy games and they'd name those things. You had the Holy Roller, you had the Miracle at the Meadowlands. I feel like this game belongs in that group of just insane.
The disaster crazy in the desert.
Yes, I mean, it is right there with all that stuff from history. Just an absolutely crazy game. And the fact that it took out survivor entries at a grand scale is just amazing.
Now, for normal pools like Circa, a lot of people had to figure out whether to use the Lions or not because they're on a holiday slate. But for the normal pools around the country, I will give Pool Genius credit. The Lions were the number one EV play at the start of the week. They were the number one EV play at the end of the week. So if you just blindly followed that, you're advancing at this point. If you diversified some entries, you lost some. But listen, last year, personal experience, I had 8 survivor entries. I used Pool Genius for every one of them. There was carnage at the beginning. By about halfway through the year, I had 1 entry left and rode that all the way to the finish line. So if you've lost a lot of entries, it only takes 1. Stick to the process. Don't let a bad beat like the Titans and Cardinals change your process. Process over results always. And again, credit to you guys, Jason, for being so strong on the Lions last week with the EV that was available on that game.
Well, we sat here and we discussed the Lions and Rams. I think we both had them, like both of those. And I talked.
And I went 50-50.
Yes.
I went 50-50 on my entries.
I lost entries on the Rams, certainly. But, when I talked, I said one of the reasons you use Rams in a spot like this is it sets up, you've got the biggest favorite, you have like the overcards, and you have a bunch of riskier plays that are more popular. And that's how it worked out. And we didn't know which games would hit, and we caught some craziness. But the reason you play them is for weeks like this, where people are trying to get through riskier teams, even though they still had good odds. As it turns out, Detroit and Indy were the only 2 teams with any popularity that got through. And then I think the Vikings. And then after that, you have to get down to like the Saints. It's like maybe the next most picked team that actually got entries through.
Yeah, absolutely wild week. Who knows what week 6 has in store for us, but let's hop into it, Jason.
Yep.
In this video, we're going to first talk about the 5 most popular picks according to Pool Genius data going into week 6 as we record here on Tuesday afternoon. From there, we'll look at the biggest favorite of the week and then the second tier of favorites. And at the end of the show, we'll talk about each of our top 3 picks for NFL Survivor pools in week number 6. Let's kick things off with the 5 most popular teams in NFL Survivor pools for week number 6, according to Pool Genius. We will start with number 5, and it's the Indianapolis Colts, almost a touchdown favorite again for the second consecutive week. They are hosting the Arizona Cardinals, which we've talked about plenty at this point, shooting themselves in the foot. They shot themselves in the foot so many times last week, they may not have feet anymore. 5% projected popularity for the Indianapolis Colts. Again, the Cardinals going on the road to take on Indianapolis. We'll see whether the Cardinals can bounce back. We'll see whether the market thinks the Colts should be this big of a favorite after, an all-time fluky outcome for the Arizona Cardinals. But number 5 in pick popularity for Survivor Bulls is the Colts at 5% for week 6.
Coming in at number 4, we have a team that is going across the Atlantic. The Broncos are facing the Jets in London at Wembley. And so they are a 7.5-point favorite in that game. Similar to the Colts. The Colts were heavily used to get through last week. The Broncos were heavily used in week 1 and in some other weeks. And so some of that is availability holding these 2 teams down. We have Denver at 6% expected. And there are also some good spots for Denver coming up. So we think some people will save them and stay off them this week, which is going to keep their ownership down.
Number 3, the LA Rams. If you didn't use them last week, you might consider using them this week, even though they lost a week ago. The Rams are 7.5-point favorites on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. Projected ownership of 10%, according to Pool Genius, at the start of week 6. Couple of things to consider here. The Rams do come off extra rest despite losing that game to the 49ers B squad on Thursday Night Football. Also, this is an early week line. We expect most of the players who missed last week for the Ravens to miss again, but that still is something that needs to be monitored as we get closer and closer to kickoff. Lamar Jackson is expected to miss as of Tuesday afternoon. We'll see. A lot of the defensive players are expected to miss, but we still have to keep an eye on that. Safety Kyle Hamilton, cornerback Chidobe Awuzie, Marlon Humphrey, the nickelback, Roquan Smith at linebacker. Those guys are all still questionable. We'll see if they're able to come back or not. We certainly know that Matabike on the defensive line is on IR and he will miss. And we also know that Ronnie Stanley is still questionable as well. So if all of those guys miss, clearly the Ravens could not be competitive against the Houston Texans a week ago with so many injuries. And it stands to reason that if it's the same roster out there in week number 6, it's going to be equally as tough against an LA Rams team. Not even cover the spread, but we're talking about win the game outright for survivor pool purposes. I have a hard time believing that if there's that many injuries for the Ravens, but we have to wait and see and know for sure once the final injury report comes out. Again, the Rams, 7.5-point favorites, pick popularity of 10%.
Yeah, coming in at number 2, we have a Thursday night football game again. So not only do we just have the Rams going against another injured team, we now have another Thursday night game if you're having flashbacks to last week. We have the Eagles, who are playing the Giants on Thursday night football. Now, this game is one of 2 matchups that we're going to see between these 2 teams over the next 3 weeks. And so I think one thing you're thinking about is, where do I want to use the Eagles? In Circa, they have Thanksgiving eligibility. That makes them a factor. I think in other pools, maybe less of a factor, but you probably want to consider them one of these 2 spots. This is a spot where some people are using them as an alternative to the most popular pick on the board.
And the number 1 most popular pick in survivor pools for NFL week number 6, as projected by Pool Genius, the Green Bay Packers, 14.5-point favorites at home against the Joe Burrow-less Cincinnati Bengals. A pick projection of 42% as we record Tuesday afternoon from the guys over at Pool Genius. Obvious reasons why, right? The Packers are coming off a bye. They're one of the top 5 rated teams in the NFL, no matter which power rankings you're looking at. They likely will get healthier coming off the bye with a couple of offensive linemen that missed in recent weeks, with a guard in Aaron Banks and a tackle in Zach Tom. Keep an eye on the rest of the injuries that the Packers had coming into this week, but the Bengals just have not been able to compete without Joe Burrow. They have offensive line issues that have been one of the worst in protecting the quarterback by pressure rate allowed since 2021. The defense is lacking talent. And if you thought the offensive line was bad, well, surely the cure is trading for Joe Flacco. That'll fix the offensive line. So I don't know if Joe Flacco is going to play this week or if it's just going to be Jake Browning again. But regardless, it does not look good for the Bengals whatsoever if they weren't able to compete against other top-of-the-line defenses in recent weeks. What is there to make us think that they're going to be able to do it again against the Green Bay Packers defense? So the Packers, number 1 pick popularity for NFL Week 6 at 14.5-point favorites, 42% projected pick popularity, which leads us into our first handicapping segment, Jason Lisk. This is the only team that's a double-digit favorite in week number 6. So let's start the discussion. Are we swallowing the popularity, or are we talking about just a set it and forget it situation here? As we talk about this, let's pull up the season grid, look at future value for the Green Bay Packers as well. And, despite this high rating in the market for the Packers, despite the Bengals playing terribly in recent weeks, trading for Joe Flacco, it's still hard for me, at least. I'm not saying I don't want to take the Packers because I think they're going to lose. I'm not saying that, but it is kind of hard for me to get the past couple of performances by the Packers out of my head.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about that and thinking more game. The Bengals have been pretty rough, and they might get a dose of Flacco. I don't know. What do you think? I think it's less likely that he starts, but he's going to be in that Baker Mayfield mold. You remember when Mayfield was signed by the Rams midweek, came off the bench and broke some survivor hearts when he beat the Raiders with a late comeback. I think Flacco may be on call, but they're not going to throw him into the start on less than a week.
I don't think it matters, honestly.
Yeah,
I don't care
probably
if it
doesn't.
Flacco.
With that defense, you've got a guy who's really struggled there in Browning, and you've got a 40-year-old who, quite frankly, was looking pretty bad and got benched, and probably was an upgrade by benching him to a mid-round rookie in Cleveland. So I'm not sure. What I do think is Flacco when he is on, can at least push the ball to some of these receivers and create some variance that way. But he's also, he's thrown a ton of picks already this year. He hasn't been,
Let me tell you why I disagree.
Yeah.
I don't think Flacco in any way, shape, or form will be an upgrade to Jake Browning. I mean, maybe he throws a few less picks and it's a ton of turnovers from the quarterback and just not being able to move the ball. Because to this point in the season, with an offensive line that at least for part of the season was healthy and far better than what the Bengals have trotted out there every week, Flacco still only had a 35% success rate. So I don't see why going behind one of the worst offensive lines we've seen since 2021 is going to make things any better for the Cincinnati Bengals offense, unless it's, just he understands he's got to get rid of the ball in 2 seconds and they're just going to dink and dunk all their way down the field. And I don't see much upside here, even if Flacco gets in the game.
Yeah, I mean, the Packers are a heavy favorite for a reason. They're like 90% to win, right? This is when you get to 90%, we're in that game mode where it's going to take really fluky. It's going to take what happened to the Arizona Cardinals and Titans. It's going to take punt returns. It's going to take crazy turnovers.
Because what let's paint a picture, right? Because I honestly can't. I really can't. I mean, unless they drop the ball 5 times like the Patriots did against the Steelers, that's literally the only way I can think of anything, because the Bengals don't have a defense, they don't have an offensive line, and they don't have a quarterback. So I can't see it, to be honest with you. It's just a matter of game theory, right?
It's tough. So let's talk game 3 with a 90% favorite that it's going to take like ridiculous stuff to beat them. At high ownership, and I think there's no doubt they're going to be highly owned. We put, because you look at the slate and there's a bunch of options at 75-ish%, but some of those have been heavily used. And some of those have other spots where you want to use them. So I think when you think about it that way, you're thinking, do I just use Green Bay to advance my entry to those other weeks? So there's some element to that. They have a positive EV, but it's capped, right? If 45% of the pool's on with you, and it doesn't look like there's going to be, my guess is there's not going to be a heavy public concentration on anyone else. Maybe the Eagles, maybe. You don't really benefit from one upset. You're probably looking at a case where, 15 to 20% of the pool is going to get clipped because there's going to be some of these teams will lose. And so you're going to advance your entry, but you're not going to see a big swing, right? And so there's value in that, but I think it depends on what kind of pool you're playing, right? If I'm in a small pool, and I told you, I was in one that got chopped. One of the ones I entered is down to 10, and I'm one of 10. Well, I'll probably think about the Packers heavily in that one, and just let's push it on to next week and play it out from there, right? That's certainly in play. Now, I may decide not to. If I think 8 of the 10 others are going to go Packers, and the Rams news comes in because I have the Rams available on that entry, maybe I switch it up and go Rams now, Packers in week 9. And hope that
if all those Ravens players are out,
something happens to the Rams where they're not as big a favorite against the Saints in week 9, injuries, what have you, and then I'm sitting pretty good. So that's at least in play in my mind as I think about it. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to decide that. But in smaller pools, I am strongly thinking Packers. In pools that only require 1 pick per week from here on out, I'm strongly thinking Packers. In pools where I got to make multiple picks late, though, there are some intriguing options we're going to get to later, and I think we'll talk about some of those that to try to win those kind of pools.
So just to further illustrate the point you're making about Packers' future value, do me a favor and sort week 9 by win probability. And week 9, you're going to see, there's the Packers and Rams again.
Yep.
And that's the discussion you were talking about, right? And that new tool you added to Pool Genius, you can click the pick percentage button and see, at least right now, a few weeks out, what Pool Genius is projecting is more popular, and actually the Packers are not the most popular for that week. So that's potentially an option if all things hold. Obviously, we'll save that information for our subscribers in week 9 closer to kickoff, and that's just a rough projection right now, but it's at least something to think about at this juncture. If you would, Jason, also sort for week 11 as well. And week 11 is yet another week where the Packers are the most projected, or the highest win percentage projection coming into the week. And hit that pick percentage button again, Jason, and it's very even distribution for week 11, where we're unclear on if or who anybody will be heavy popularity for that week. So This to me, again, based on game theory and typically a personal preference, always wanting to fade the most popular pick, is a clear spot where I'm going to probably try and look for somebody other than the Packers this week. That's just my personal preference.
Yeah, and so as you think about that, if you look at our numbers, picking the Packers now is your best chance to survive, right? And it's probably your best chance on
survive this week,
but also even going forward. It probably gives your entry because locking in a 90% advance rate on any week's probably going to be something you can't normally do. Let's start with the Bills, right? But it's not that much higher. So let's say you go Rams now, Packers 9 versus Packers now, Rams 9. I think Packers now, Rams 9 probably has a slightly higher 2v2 advance rate. Slightly, though, like 1 or 2% higher. But it's going to be 10 times more popular as a path than Rams now, Packers later, right? Even though Rams now, Packers later are both semi-popular, it's not even going to be close. So in a pool where you're thinking game theory like that, you're getting the better EV payoff probably by having the Packers in 9. Because who's more likely to lose out of these groups, right? I think the Rams, based on what we've seen, are more likely to lose to the Saints than the Packers are to the Bengals. But I also like having the Packers available 9 as the counter to that, as the high EV play. So I'm not willing to write off the Packers, but I do think that is an intriguing option, and we didn't have that Rams option 2 weeks ago. This is a game that's popped up because of the Ravens injuries and just what's happened with that team, which is, my gosh, I have them 9 points power rated lower than I'm going to have them probably in week 8.
Yeah. I mean, last week I had them in the 20s. I got them even lower now.
Yeah, we're going to publish we're actually publishing this week for the first time the numbers I do behind the scenes on power rating teams. But yeah, the Ravens are down in that group. There's really a clear bottom 8 plus the Bengals and Ravens with their quarterback issues, where there's a large separation, and they're definitely within that group and probably toward the bottom half of it right now. I mean, I'd probably take the Dolphins over the Ravens right now. I'd probably take, the Jets or Giants would be a tough call, straight up. That's the range they're in. So at least for now, while they don't have Jackson and while they have all these injuries.
All right, let's go to the second tier of favorites for those that are interested in not picking the Packers this week. We have 3 more teams that are a touchdown or more favorite, and it's the Eagles on Thursday Night Football against the Giants. It's the Rams, 7.5-point favorites at the Ravens. It's the Broncos as a 7-point favorite in London against the New York Jets. For me, Jason, out of this tier, the Rams clearly stand out. If the Ravens are all going to be missing all those same players again this week, I think that's obvious. But as we record here on Tuesday afternoon, we don't quite know that.
Right.
The Eagles are interesting to me because I think I'd rather have them, even though they're on the road, I think I'd rather have them in the first game against the Giants than 2 weeks later at home against the Giants when you just saw that team and maybe there's some adjustments that can be made. But I got to see about the offensive line injuries as well with Landon Dickerson. He had a foot issue, I think, or an ankle issue. If you look at just metrics, I'm not sure the Eagles should be 7.5-point favorites, but that's not the calculus here for survivor pools. It's whether they're going to win or not. So although I think they're probably inflated at 7.5, I don't know where the offense is coming from for the Giants with down 2 wide receivers, including Malik Neighbors, a bad offensive line, backup running back, rookie quarterback against Vic Fangio. I don't know. The Eagles are winning ugly, but I think it's also fair to say the Eagles have played a pretty tough schedule to this point against top half of the league teams. And this is a totally different ask of this Eagles team.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I'll throw this out. As you mentioned, you might be more willing to play them on the road here. These series, like the Eagles and Giants and some of these NFC East matchups in the division, there isn't much home field advantage. These teams are separated by 100-something miles. The weather's the same. I mean, there's going to be fans from both teams in the crowd. It's one of those things where, yeah, if you're willing to play the team against the division rival, I'm not sure in this case it matters all that much. It may be less than a point on the spread, honestly. I'm not sure that it matters that much in this matchup. And that might be why you're seeing the 7.5, because there might not be much home field built in for this matchup. But yeah, I agree with you there. Now, I'm more thinking longer term though.
Okay.
But this is in the pools where I'm in large pools. That week 15 spot. Eagles at home against the Raiders in December in Philadelphia is a spot where they could be somewhat used up and definitely leverage against more popular picks. And in a multi-pick pool where I'm making 2 picks that week, I feel the Eagles are essential. So if you have a pool where you're making 2 picks late, I think the Eagles are a save for those type of pools.
If you're in a straight up pool though, where it's just 1 pick a week, I got to be honest with you, man. Although I caveated it with they played a lot tougher teams than what the Giants are at this point, I think it's the list of weeks I am going to be comfortable using the Eagles has shrunk versus what I thought the first couple of weeks. Just looking at this grid, I mean, you mentioned Vegas.
Look at our win odds. Yeah, not
a lot of green
games or toss-up games from here on out.
Yeah. I mean, it's the Giants and then the Raiders game and then
maybe the Bears.
Maybe Chicago's better than we thought.
Yeah.
So I'm looking real hard at maybe at least an entry on the Eagles. The Denver game's interesting. I just want to look at what their green is across the season here. They have a pretty easy schedule. It's why I bet them before the start of the year to go over 9.5 wins on the season. Yep. And I think I'm not sure I'm totally comfortable with these international spots. It just seems like it can get a little weird and wonky and have more variance with this going across the ocean situation.
It definitely feels like it's probably a spot I'm not going to use for a lot of reasons with Denver. Used them on a lot of entries. I think 7 and 10 are better spots for them, relatively speaking, even at somewhat moderate ownership, like in the teens. Because you're going to catch a lot of people out of picks and making picks into you those weeks. And what you talked about, so and not only is it the international spot, it's Denver in the international. It's the only team in the Mountain Time Zone other than the Raiders when part of the year. But if you're talking like elevation, mountains, travels everywhere. So their travel schedule is brutal as it is as the season goes on. And then to have to go across the pond for a game, it feels like something I probably want to just and the Jets, man, this Jets team feels like they're just underperforming. I mean, Justin Fields missed so many chances against the Cowboys that he could have done better. I mean, they underperformed.
Yeah, you could see the tail outcome for the Jets at any given week, right? If they would just kind of put it together. They're not Titans bad.
No.
They're just undisciplined, right?
Yeah, I mean, Justin Fields is not efficient. He misses throws that he could hit. But if he has a game where he hits them, I mean, Garrett Wilson's a stud. He missed some shots. He had Garrett Wilson chances, and he didn't take advantage of them against a questionable defense. So this is probably a spot I want to probably just, because they're not one of the top favorites and they're kind of in that 4th, 5th spot, I probably am not even firing Denver this week. I'm saving them for 7 or 10, I think.
Yeah, I think next week's very interesting, especially, again, as you alluded to, the fact that a lot of people in your pools have already used Denver earlier in the year, whether it was week 1 against the Titans or maybe week 4 against Cincinnati. Yeah. There's not a lot of optionality out there left and not a lot of available entries that have the Broncos left at this point. So I think that just naturally is going to keep the pick percentage down, even if they're a big favorite any given week. So, all right. So let's get into any remaining options here that you want to talk about. Yeah. The other teams that are more than a 4-point favorite, the Colts against the Cardinals, 6.5-point favorite, Steelers, 5-point favorite coming off the bye against the Browns, who just had to go road game, London road game. Talk about bad travel stretches for the Browns. Raiders 4.5-point favorite at home against the Titans, which is mind-boggling for the Raiders as a 4.5-point favorite. Nevertheless, it is the Titans. And Commanders 4.5-point favorite against the Bears. Anybody you want to feature here that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, I think they all have their own arguments are in play, right? Because the Colts are going to be relatively low ownership because so many had to use them to get through. And while it's not, I think, a smash spot and you might want them for week 8, they also could be really popular in week 8. And I do think the Colts will have value elsewhere. So I'm not saying this is a smash pick. But I do worry about Arizona's mental state. Like, I feel like they're ripe to not play well coming off of what just happened. And the Colts could be just even better than we thought. I mean, they just keep putting up numbers that exceed expectations consistently. So I think the Colts are in play for that reason. The two I like here, actually, Washington and Vegas.
Washington, really?
In larger pools, because Washington has such a tough schedule. Like, if you look at it, that I'm kind of surprised. I mean, why do we think this number is where it is? Like, do you think this is a good number? I guess they're building in some Chicago coming off of a bye risk, because I think this number should be higher based on where we've been power rating these teams till now by about a point. But maybe, I mean, Chicago did have the bye, so they are rested. Washington has looked good for the most part. Jaden Daniels came back. They just went on the road and won, I think, fairly convincingly at the Chargers. 2 weeks ago with Mariota, looked convincing in winning without Daniels. I mean, the market is a little down on Washington relative to the results they've been putting up. So anyway, I kind of like Washington because that schedule. Let's look at their schedule real quick. Chicago this week. Miami, and I think it's in Barcelona. It's in Spain, right? In week 11. And then it's the road game at the Giants and the home game against Dallas. And they have a tough schedule. They still get the Chiefs, the Seahawks, the Lions, the Broncos, at the Vikings, the Eagles twice. So there aren't going to be many spots where you're going to want to sneak them through, and they're fairly low owned. And so to me, they are a counter in large pools at low ownership. They're kind of, because they're not the obvious future value savings play, but I think they accomplish a lot of what using a team with no future value does. And then the Raiders have none, right? This is a spot. The Titans are not good. The Titans are still my worst rated power rated team in the league. Slightly. I think it'd be a pick 'em between them and the Bengals on a neutral field. Close to a pick 'em in their current state. But the Titans, and then you have them coming off a completely undeserved win. I mean, they scored on a interception that they threw. I mean, come on. And so we have life. I mean, I was worried that this spot would be interim coach versus the Raiders, and I wouldn't want to touch it. But you're giving me Callahan here, and you're give me a Raiders team that was injured last week, didn't have Bowers, didn't have some things, and got smoked. But I think they weren't dominated statistically as much as that score indicated. They had turnovers. Geno's been a turnover machine, but I like the Raiders as being better than the Titans. And this is one of those spots at low ownership, if I can sneak a 67, 68% win odds team through on entries where I need to pick 20, 25 teams, the Raiders are very attractive this week.
Yeah, I agree the Titans are still the nut low. What happened last week doesn't change my opinion on that whatsoever. So I agree with you there. I disagree with you on the Commanders. I'll give you a couple reasons why. Number one, I think the Bears defense that we saw the last couple of times we've seen them was pretty injured, and they're going to get a lot of those guys back. They're not getting Jalen Johnson back, I don't think. Their number one cornerback, he's still on IR. He's not eligible. I am a little concerned that the Bears defense will be better than what we've seen the past couple of times we've seen them. As far as the Commanders are concerned, I feel like I can shoot a couple of holes in their past couple of weeks that we've seen. Number one, the Chargers offensive line was decimated. I think the Bears offensive line as constituted is much stronger than what the Commanders faced with the Chargers offensive line missing multiple starters. And the Commanders also could not stop the Atlanta Falcons offense on the road a couple of weeks ago. I mean, they went up and down the field on the Commanders defense. So I think unless the Commanders front is getting pressure against a bad offensive line, the back half of that Commanders defense becomes pretty concerning. So that would be my pushback out of this group. The other three, I generally agree with you, especially with the travel spot for the Steelers, extra rest, Browns, brutal schedule, third road game in a row when one of those was international. I don't know what the Cardinals are going to do. I don't know if this is a bounce back spot or they're completely demoralized. I just know that the Cardinals have had more wonkiness and weirdness than any other team in the league when you consider the backdoor against the Panthers, the shenanigans from last week. So I just think that there's a chance that the Cardinals still might be underrated in the market. I don't know if they're good enough to beat the Colts. It just makes me a little nervous that maybe they're undervalued.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's wrap things up here. Jason. Give me your top 3 for this week. Whatever context you want to take with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll start at the top. They burned me last week. We had them in our top 3. And I want to see news. I want to see the news, right? Yep. I want to see. I mean, I need to hear Lamar Jackson's out. I think that's where it's going to be. Baltimore has the good fortune of being in the AFC North this year, which is an absolute dumpster fire. The only team over 500 is the Steelers, and they're not. I mean, then the Ravens are going to get them twice. So the Ravens can view that as we've got the whole thing in front of us, so we just get to the bye week. I think that's how they're going to treat it. I think they're going to treat it like, let's get to the bye week. I don't care if we're 1-5. We're going to go on our run after the bye week. And so I think they rest him if there's any doubt. If he's not 100%, they're going to give him 2 weeks. And so I think you're going to see that. And I think you're going to see that with the defensive players unless they're 100%. So I think the Ravens are going to treat this like, because of the division they play in, we can still come back from 1-5. And so I like the Rams, assuming this number holds over a touchdown. The Rams almost won last week despite 2 fumbles, 1 unforced, 1 a punch out at the goal line as they were about to win it, a drop on 3rd down immediately before a missed field goal, a missed extra point that loomed large, and then getting stuffed on 4th down. That's like 5 or 6 events, plus other key drops. And the 49ers had no errors. They didn't have any turnovers. They were 3 for 3 on 4th down. They made all their kicks. So they were basically -5 in what I would call adjusted turnovers, turnover on downs, turnovers. And they almost won the game, right? Mm-hmm. That shows you how good they are, that they screwed up that bad and they almost won the game. So I'm willing to take the chance that they're not going to go -5 in crazy turnover events. And if they do, they burn me, but so be it. I like taking teams that are coming off a loss. I think you get a little popularity discount in some pools. I think people are going to be a little scared off by what just happened. And they're also going to see the Ravens and stay off for a little bit. So I kind of like the Rams, number 1. I mentioned the Raiders. I think the Raiders are in my top 3 because I play in a lot of multi-pick pools, a lot of in strike pools, I'm going to be using the Raiders heavily. Rebuy pools, I'm using the Raiders. I am not using a team with any value when I can just rebuy into the pool. Because I've gotten through the last several weeks with low future value picks. I got through a rebuy with the Saints. Well, I'm going to keep pushing it with the Raiders. So the Raiders are on my board because of the types of pools I play and the large pools. I think if you're in a pool with thousands of entries, the Raiders at fairly low ownership allows you to save the Packers for later if you get through. And you're going to need to get so many picks right that you can't just think about surviving this week. So I'm on the Raiders. And then I'm going to go flip side. I like the Packers in the short term on small pools. I'm probably going to have some Packers. We haven't successfully got through with the Packers yet. I'm not going to want to use them 100% in week 9. I'm not going to want to use them 100% in week 11. I think week 11 is a weird spot where there's so many options that right now picks aren't going to be concentrated. So I'm not sure I want to use them that much that week. I probably want to find the team I want out of that other group. I might use them in week 14. But that also means I'm willing to use some entries to get through now as a different way to play it in case we get another crazy week where there's just like 5 or 6 of these teams lose that are below them. So I'm willing to do the Packers on some entries.
All right, my top 3. And Jason, as I unveil this, do me a favor. Let's pull up the just data grid and sort by popularity. And we'll just drive home the point that the Packers are overwhelmingly popular, at least as we project here at the start of week number 6. And as I do each and every week, I immediately cross out the most popular team. So that's the Packers. They will not be in my top 3. That means I got to go elsewhere, and I agree with you. My number one team this week is the LA Rams. Again, pending the injuries for the Ravens, we think it's going to be just as bad as it was last week. If that changes, I'll leave it in the comments of what my new top 3 would be, but I think this is trending pretty much towards the Ravens sitting all those players yet again. Number 2 is the Eagles on TNF. I think this is a huge step down in class from what the Eagles have faced. I do have long-term upside ceiling concerns for the Eagles still. That's why I bet against them last week and bet on the Broncos to cover the spread against the Eagles, and I was right. There are some big issues with this Eagles team trying to defend a Super Bowl, but that's not the same argument as whether or not they can beat the New York Giants, who have a ton of injuries on offense and are just depleted in terms of talent on the roster overall, other than the defensive line. And number 3, I was going to say Broncos. The international spot keeps me off of it. I like the spot better next week for the Broncos. So the Raiders have made my top 3, not because of anything the Raiders have done, simply because the Titans are just the worst team by a wide margin, in my opinion, still. Going into last week, the Titans were the worst offense in the NFL by EPA since 2021. They were the worst defense in the NFL by EPA since 2021. And their offensive line had allowed a pressure rate that also would have been the worst of any team since 2021. So it's a straight fade of this team until some changes get made on that coaching staff. Rams, Eagles, Raiders for me. Again, if you find the content helpful, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Let us know in the comments who you're picking this week. That's the challenge this week, 550 likes if we can get it. Thank you so much for the support. To the faithful departed who lost their entries in the carnage last week, we salute you and we press forward trying to win these NFL survivor pools. For Jason Lisk, I'm Steven Andress. It only takes one entry. Best of luck in NFL survivor pools for week number 6.